Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my weekly compendium for the week ending Monday, February 21st, 2022. Case file number 525, written by Mango Icy, the secret dream girl with a red birthmark. So I know people talk about déjà vu a lot, and people love to explain it away with science, like, your brain is tricking you because insert logical reason here. You just feel like this scenario has happened before, but it hasn't actually happened yet. I do agree with this to an extent. All of my déjà vus initially occur in my dreams when I am fully asleep and unconscious. When it happens again in reality, I always stop and think about it. But I dismiss it because it most likely is just my mind recreating a sense of familiarity. I always try to find simple, logical reasons for unexplained things because not everything strange has to be paranormal. However, I had this one déjà vu moment where I can't explain it. It's nothing spooky, just strange. Hear me out. I was 14 or 15 at the time. I was visiting my sister's boyfriend's family in their vacation home. I was having a lot of trouble sleeping at the time because it was just really hot, humid, and I was uncomfortable as hell. I would only get like 3 hours of sleep a night, and I'd never go into a deep sleep. One morning, I woke up, but I didn't fully wake up. My eyes were half open, and I was just staring at the wall in front of me, but it felt like I was in a trance. My brain wasn't registering that I was conscious. I was in a state between being asleep and awake. I can't explain it well, and that's the first and last time that's happened to me. I imagine this is what the beginning of lucid dreaming feels like if I had the ability to lucid dream. So I'm staring at the wall and a picture of a little girl pops up in front of me, just floating on the blank space of the wall. I've never seen this little girl before in my life. She's white, has blonde hair, is wearing a black and red uniform, black blazer with buttons on top, red skirt on bottom, and has a star hairpin in her hair. She has a super distinctive red birthmark on the left side of her face. In my dream, I'm confused because I've never seen this girl before and I'm wondering who she is. After, I fully wake up and I actively think about what I just dreamed about. I remember everything and I write down what she looks like on the notepad in my phone, jotting down every detail I mentioned in this post in case I forgot. That whole day, I was thinking about her. Later that night, my sister's boyfriend's daughter, who is the same age as me, is showing me her school yearbook. She flips through several pages, and I see that little girl's picture. That same exact picture that I saw that morning in my dream. The red and black uniform is her school uniform, and she's in the 2nd grade. The hairpin and the birthmark are all there. She is the same person I dreamed about, and I've never seen her before. I'm super freaked out, and I start to tell her about it. She's obviously very confused and skeptical, so I show her the notepad on my phone and she's like, "How do you know her?" I said I don't and that I saw her in my dream, so understandably, she's creeped out, doesn't believe me, and I'm very sure she thinks I'm a weirdo stalker. So yeah, I know this isn't a huge experience, but that was the only time in my life that I actively recalled details about a dream, wrote it down, and had details match an experience I had later, to the T. It's the only time I've ever experienced personal proof that I dreamed about something and saw it again later. The déjà vu wasn't a scenario, but it was an image. Case notes, file number 525. I've read quite a few stories similar to this, where the person dreams of an event or person or object, and they see that same thing play out in real life in one form or another, be it an entire scenario unfolding, like predicting the future, foresight, or simply visualizing something that happens later, a very specific event, maybe a car passing by, a specific type, or seeing a building they never saw before, or in your case, a person. It's not always in perfect sequence though. And this also makes me think of a Stargate SG-1 episode, spoiler warning once more, called Prophecy. In it, Jonah suddenly gains the ability to witness the future. However, he realizes that he cannot alter this future. He's not seeing the future, but one possible version of it, with nearly infinite possibilities available to play out. And they all do on all the other server copies within the multiverse we inhabit. But a question this poses is, if we perceive the future, that act in of itself, of seeing the future, alters that future too, no? For that future to transpire as you see it, you'd have to be seeing a future that was altered by you having seen the future before you saw that future. Boy, that makes one's head hurt, right? Time distortions are wacky. Huh, I love and I hate them. They sure do make good glitches and good sci-fi. Bonus file, written by A. Braden. My mom is haunting me for a secret reason. My mom died 6 months ago. She had not been doing well since my dad died the year before. She has always had emotional issues and has always made me her favorite child. She relied on me the most for everything, thinking I was her savior. I may have been a good kid who followed all the rules while I was a kid until my dad died, but things changed. Once my father died, my mom started having so many health issues and was nearly brain dead from a hard fall, which required life-saving surgery. She recovered, but was never fully herself again. After several months and a couple of different living arrangements, she decided to move out near me. I became her only person in the area. It was during the pandemic, so any contact with anyone else is very limited. It was a very lonely time for her. I felt like she was going downhill. After a month of hospital stay and nursing home care, she was released to assisted living and then died 1 week later in hospice. This wasn't expected. I thought she would live at least another year, but she went downhill so quickly the doctor had ordered hospice. The day she died, I was in traffic with my daughter. I was notified via text that she passed away. When I got home, I was texting my siblings, and then I heard my name in her voice in my left ear. It was her frantic voice that said, "What's happening?" that she would get all the time. I became familiar with her variety of tones. I knew her mood or need based on how she said my name. I told my siblings what happened, and my brother said they had just removed her body. As months passed, I have experienced the following. 2 black masses circling around my head. They were about the size of golf balls. The large picture on the wall being pulled hard away from the wall and slamming down over and over again. I woke up to seeing this in front of me and freaking out. My head skipped a beat. Then the door handle on my car door while I'm in my car getting ready to pull out of my space, pulling the door handle like she did many times when I would take her places, like an eager toddler. This little figure is getting knocked off the windowsills all the time. I have a few different ones, but only the one that says boo. I still have her ashes, and my dad's in the room with me. I'm planning to scatter them this summer. Why is my mom haunting me? I feel like she's always over my shoulder. I feel like maybe she moved on a little more, but she's still hanging around. I did tell her before she died that she should try to reach me from beyond, if it happens. But I think I'm ready for her to fully move on now. Sage hasn't worked. I have tried that a couple of times. What can I do to move on and release her from this world? I don't hate her. I'm not even scared anymore. I just don't want her to think she needs to watch out for me or rely on me anymore. To me, she has proven that there is an afterlife. But I want her to go live with my dad or whatever she needs to do. I don't know what to do right now with all these experiences. Bonus file, written by Dr. Yared. Secrets of Snickering Children as an Omen of Death. Being part of the medical community has afforded me the chance to evaluate patterns in all stages of life, of people, including patterns that we see at the end of life. Some of you that work in hospitals or have loved ones that work in hospitals or have been close to loved ones as they took their last breaths and transitioned to the great unknown may have heard of what I'm about to describe. There's a particular phenomenon that occurs to people in those last moments, and I'm talking about the appearance of kids running around their deathbed or just outside their room. This is to be differentiated to the phenomenon of close ones that have passed away visiting in days prior to their deaths. This is different. This occurs hours, if not minutes, before their deaths. I experience this with greater frequency whenever I work in the ICU unit, where people are very sick. What most patients describe as cheerful kids running around their beds in a playful manner, snickering around, or just playing. Most patients usually respond by calling the nurse and asking, Who are these kids running around? And where are their parents? And scaring the living bejesus out of them if they are new nurses. If they are experienced nurses, they know when this happens, the time of the end is soon to come, and they communicate promptly with us doctors to let us know to be ready. Literature often chalks this phenomenon up to lack of oxygen in the brain or neurochemical changes in the process of death and dying, but the pattern is very recognizable, and the experience is very similar across all cultural backgrounds and ages. Almost all hospitals have a story about these kids, and if you are entering the field of medicine, nursing, or any other health-allied profession, you will certainly hear these stories. So if you are doing rounds in the ICU late at night and hear some snickering or tiny feet running in the hallways, prepare, because the call of code green or code red is about to sound off in the PA system. File number 526, written by Charles Tells All, 1989. The Secrets of a Man Who Lost His Wife Far Too Young. What became of my wife? Hey everyone, my name is Charles. In college, I met an incredible woman and fell in love. After many awkward encounters and clumsy dates, we finally formed a solid relationship and ended up getting married soon after college. We moved in together, got our first serious jobs, and life was going really well for us. We had both been from fairly small families, and we had long talked about having a large family together, and soon after getting married, started trying to grow our family. We had trouble at first, but we were young and we told ourselves that we had tons of time. Several years later, we were still trying, and that was by far the most difficult part of our marriage. But as a whole, we were still strong together and definitely still loved each other deeply. My wife had gone to school to be a nurse, and early in our 7th year of marriage, she finished going back to school to be a nurse practitioner. She found a new job in a town we were both really excited about moving to, across the state, so we packed up and moved our things. My job allowed me to move essentially anywhere, so we were definitely going to take this opportunity for her and for our small family. One night, not long after we moved into our new home, boxes still half empty in many rooms, I started wondering why my wife hadn't returned home yet. Sometimes she got calls right before she was about to leave the hospital, so I certainly wasn't a stranger to late nights and dinner alone, but this night was especially long. Not only that, and this might just be me looking back into the event after the fact, but the longer I waited, the more I felt like something wasn't right. I had been texting and calling my wife on and off for a while as well, and unlike her, she wasn't responding at all. After a while, right before I was about to call the hospital to check and see if she was still at work, my phone rang with an unknown number. Thinking that maybe she had stayed at work late and her phone had died, I answered the number. It was a man on the other end with a professional-sounding voice that immediately made me nervous. He told me that he was calling from the local sheriff's office, that there had been an accident, and that I needed to get to the main hospital downtown. I barely heard the words. I understood him, but I was honestly like the sheriff was speaking to me underwater. Nonetheless, in a panic, as you might imagine, I rushed to the hospital. After speaking with staff there, to my utter horror, I was no longer there to talk to my wife. I was no longer even there to hold her hand as she struggled with the ventilator or clung to life courageously, though she had been the strongest woman I had ever known. The crash and the injuries she had sustained were too much even for her. She had died on the way to the hospital. Later, I learned that she had drove through the rain that night. A deer had run in front of the car. She had swerved to miss the deer, clipped it, and her car ended up in a fair-sized gully off the side of the road. She had smashed into a tree at the bottom of the deep ditch. After the funeral, I never really felt alone for a few weeks. Family and even a few friends from where we had used to live checked on me constantly for a while, making sure I was making it okay. Making sure I was getting out of bed and eating. But after a while, the visits got less and less as everyone returned to their regular lives. Yet for some reason, I always felt two ways at once, especially in the home we had started to unpack in together, the home that was still only partially unpacked in. I felt deeply, terribly alone, lost at sea without the only one who has always been there by my side since college. But at the same time, strangely, I continued to never feel alone. Yet this was different from the feeling of friends and family in the house. Their visits felt like space was being taken up, like mass and matter was in the house. This, now that I was alone, felt like a presence, but like the presence of wind or shadow or whispers. I know I haven't explained it well, but in the several years since, I have never been able to explain it well. I have tried many times, but I have never been able to put into words the feeling in that house, the alone and not alone at the same time. Yet even for me, eventually, life went on, but the presence continued, and the longer it continued, the more uneasy it tended to make me. You might think that the longer this feeling, this sensation went on, the more used to it I got, but that was not the case. The more it happened, the more unnatural the feelings got. There were times I began to feel almost paranoid about the saturated emptiness of the house. It was like the wrong vibration would grip me, like some deep, sickly, sickening feeling of a terrible drumbeat not resonating properly in my bones. And although I continued to work, often more and more to distract myself, my work was often done at home, and thus escaping the feeling became harder and harder. And you might think that I should have just left the house and worked in the local coffee shop or something. And thinking objectively, I would agree. But I was depressed and deeply attached to the half-decorated home, and leaving the house, even to run errands, felt almost like a betrayal to me. But that was not all that happened. As weeks turned into months after her death, there was more than a faint feeling of shadow around the house. Things, small things here and there, began to happen, or at least I finally began to notice them. Perhaps at last, slowly coming out of the fog I had been in. For instance, I would put dish towels on the bar on the outside of the oven, go upstairs and come back down, and one would be on the kitchen counter. Or I would leave the light on in a particular room and return later and the light would be off. Sometimes, especially when I was downstairs, I felt like I could hear some of the partially opened boxes being moved upstairs. It was almost like they were being opened and the contents were being placed upon the floor and moved around the room. But whenever I went to check, the boxes were almost always exactly as I had left them. Occasionally, an item would be sitting by the box on the floor, but I would put it back into the box, confused and unready still to unpack those items that reminded me so much of our old life together. Things in the house and within me stayed very similar for months and eventually years. As I approached 2 years since the accident, much of me had never moved on, but the time did heal some things. Perhaps because of the first signs of healing, or perhaps because of the bitter loneliness, I finally agreed to meet a woman that a friend of mine had introduced me to. Though I had developed very few friendships in my new home, there were some who checked on me, inviting me occasionally to do things to keep me preoccupied. One of those friends had, for several months, hinted that I should go on a date with a woman he knew, but I couldn't bring myself to accept it until now. Finally though, I felt I was ready, or at least ready enough, and agreed to meet with her. We met at a local coffee shop. That was about all I could handle still, but the meeting was nice. Having another person to connect with on at least some personal level brought a little bit of warmth back into me. Yet that night was a difficult night. I returned home early in the evening, watched some show to relax, then went to bed. Since my wife's death, I had never slept well. I had tried over-the-counter sleeping aids, different type of teas, listening to music, and several other things, and yet sleep often did not come to me until late into the night. Thankfully, my job did not require me to get up early, and even when I did fall asleep, it was often fretful and sleepless. Though I had been a deep sleeper since I was a kid, I now tossed and turned in the night, often waking up cold or sweating, or jolting awake from some gripping fantasy or terrible nightmare. This night was no different. Though I had trouble falling asleep, finally, at last, I drifted into a shallow sleep. I have never known for sure if this occurred while I was awake, or if it simply was a dream that I have translated into reality. It felt terribly, horribly real, and the evidence, as I will explain, remained. Yet, for all its gripping realness, it also felt like a living nightmare. Sometime in the night, I awoke, or so I believed, out of the near quiet, save the scarce sounds of the neighborhood, to a piercing scream from somewhere on the first floor of the house. The wail tore through the house like a terrible light night, setting the hairs on my body instantly rigid, and though the presence of the house had long left me uneasy, This immediately left me terrified. But I had to check. So, not wanting to enter the darkness of any room as I approached the next light switch, I took a flashlight out of my nightstand beside the bed and crept from room to room, hurrying to each light switch along the way. I flashed my light down the stairs, straining my ears, and still I heard nothing. There was an empty, horrible silence after the screech. I finally reached the first floor, went through the foyer by the front door, and shined my light through the kitchen into the small dining room beyond. There, as my light fell into the room, shrouded in darkness, bent and crooked and horrible, behind the dining room table, was a figure. Just for a moment, the flashlight illuminated it. Just for a moment, it seemed frozen in the glow of the light, and just as quickly as I had seen it, there was nothing behind the table, and my flashlight was illuminating the wall beyond. And yet in that moment, it had been there, cruel and terrible, somehow in that one moment, contorted beyond reason. I cannot say what it was. I cannot even say for sure that it was. With what little strength I still had, I crept to the table, heart pounding, shining my light ridiculously furiously around each corner and into each nook of the darkness. I reached the table where it had been, and there, in the center of the table, was a picture. I shined my light on it, and immediately I could tell that it was dusty, taken, I would imagine, from one of the boxes I had yet to fully unpack. Unable and unwilling to examine it further there, I hurried back up the stairs, locked the door to the bedroom, and wiped off the picture frame. There, to my disbelief, was a picture of me and my wife, taken not long into our marriage, smiling. Yet down the center of the frame, the glass had been cracked, not smoothly, but roughly, almost as if the heel of a shoe had pressed down on it and sent fissures along the glass. Nothless, beyond the fissures, I could see us smiling. From that day on, the presence was more noticeable in the house. Nothing was as bad as that night, but more and more noises came from within the house. More and more things moved where they shouldn't be. Soon after the date, the woman reached out to me to see where we might meet again. I put it off for a while, though I had enjoyed our time together. That night had made me nervous. Yet eventually I agreed to meet again. We met and got dinner together, and I went home, happy at the meeting, but apprehensive. That night, sleep came surprisingly easy to me. It was not a deep sleep, but I was tired, and this was a rare night where the tiredness carried me into sleep quickly. At some point in the night, I woke up. I didn't bolt awake, but woke up simply like I often did in the night. While I laid there, waiting to go back to sleep, a car must have driven down the road. Because of the position of the house near a slight hill, when cars drove down a particular road, the light from their headlights would shine dimly through one of the windows of the room. As I listened to the soft sound of the car and watched as a soft light fell into the room, there, where the wall meets the ceiling, was a horrible figure. That crooked shadow, bent and contorted, clinging somehow to the wall and ceiling. For a moment, my mind thought that this must be some trick of the light and shadow on the ceiling, and yet before the light faded, the figure crawled, unnaturally and inhumanly, onto the ceiling and across it towards the bed. And then there was darkness, and that terrible scream, so much louder than I had heard it before, from directly above me in the near total darkness. Utterly terrified, I grabbed furiously for my flashlight, turned it on, and shined the light at the ceiling and around each corner of the room. Nothing was there, no figure, no shadow, no presence. I did not sleep that night. I turned the lights on and tried to distract myself with my phone for most of the night, yet I could still feel something was there. Though I could see nothing, though there were no more screams, I could feel something. In the following months, things continued to progress. I had no more encounters like that, but the small occurrences got more routine and worse. Instead of only distant noises and small things being moved, I would occasionally see shadows, usually for just a moment, or hear faint words, always unintelligible, almost as if whispered to me. Yet I still wasn't sure if any of it was real or if I was causing it, imagining it, if my grief and loneliness were causing it. And in those months, I came up with many reasons not to see that woman again. I liked her, but I had a terrible feeling after seeing her. The shadow, or my imagination and guilt, could not handle those meetings, innocent as they were. After many more months still, I finally decided that there was no reason for me to be in that city anymore. I had moved there to start a new chapter in our family, but the story had ended there. There would never be another chapter there. There never could be. So finally, after painstakingly considering it, I sold my home, bought a small house in the town I had grown up in, and moved our things. Actually, I have not been in the new house long. Despite that, in just a few weeks, I have unpacked more in this house than I ever did in all the years I was in the last house. This house does not hold the same weight, the same memories. So far, all has been well here. I have even started to sleep a little better, though not exactly well. The real test, perhaps, will be going on another date. I haven't brought myself to that yet. Perhaps someday I will. I think I would like to. I think my wife would have liked me to move on. Still, I don't know what was in that house or within me. I know much of it sounds like perhaps it was my wife, her spirit, if there is such a thing. Yet my wife was such a loving, caring person in life. It's hard for me to believe that some part of her could devolve to such a state. Yet it is no longer hard for me to believe in such things. I had long not believed. My wife actually loved to learn about paranormal things, loved to read books about such things, watch shows, listen to podcasts. Now, after everything, I believe in the possibility of things happening beyond normal reality, normal existence, but I do not know what this particular reality was. Perhaps it was my wife, or some part or version or shadow of my wife, contorted by the tragedy of her death. Perhaps it was an imprint of the tragedy itself, made manifest in the halls and rooms of the house she once inhabited. Perhaps it was some figment or shadow of my own mind, projected before me, the cruel and terrible embodiment of guilt and loss and betrayal. Perhaps it was something else, masquerading as a dark shadow of my wife, preying on me in my isolation and loneliness in the empty corners of our house. Perhaps still it is something else entirely. I do not know, and do not think I ever will. Thank you all so much for making it all the way through my story. It means a lot to me that you listened through the entire story. Please let me know if you have any thoughts or theories about any of this. It continues to baffle me to this day. Case notes, file number 526. This story was so incredible to read. I actually started to tear up early on when you described how your wife died. I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine what that would be like. As far as the happenings in the story, I don't think it was your wife. As you described her, she wasn't the type that would just come back to haunt anyone. I believe that ghosts do exist, but that they're echoes of who we were, the core of us inside. And if we die when we're full of malice or anger or hatred, then those feelings amplify and you come back as a malevolent spirit. But the way you describe your wife, I don't think those feelings existed in her. So if anything, the feelings that would be amplified would be positive ones. No, instead, I think if there was a spirit there, it would be a demon that would know about your pain and would try to mimic your wife, try to make you believe that she was haunting you, that if you moved on with your life, she would still be there to terrorize you. But no, that isn't your wife. She would want you to be happy. I hope you know that. Case file number 527, written by D. Gentleman, 3510. My doppelganger's secret. He kidnapped my wife. I am living in a small town in Turkey. I have a racing bike with custom paint, blue, yellow, white, red, black. So in the town I live, there are a maximum of 3 racing bikes in total, and none of them are the same brand as mine. We all know each other, and mine is custom painted. Please note that. That one day last summer, I wanted to ride my racing bike, and my wife insisted on joining me. When she is on the bike with me, I cannot go as fast as I can normally because, I don't want to be the reason for any injury or something. So I said no, and we had a little fight about that. Long story short, I drove my bike alone for 45 minutes and turned back to go home. I was nearly 5 minutes away from my home, in the opposite direction. From the headlights, I understood that it was the same bike as mine coming towards me. After we came closer, I saw that we have exactly the same custom paint. The driver was looking at my bike and I was looking at his bike, and we really slowed down for this. And here's the kicker. He had a passenger on the back, a woman, who has the exact same helmet as my wife. The road is divided with barriers in the middle, so we couldn't stop and meet, but got really confused and slowed down together. I am kind of sure it was me in a parallel universe who had accepted my wife's request and so came a little later than I did. Case notes, file number 527. So 2 possibilities. An encounter of dual doppelgangers, which I have read about before. Keep in mind, in all accounts I've seen or heard, true doppelgangers give off an extremely eerie vibe, even before you see them. If this wasn't felt, then your theory is more likely. You'd be one of the lucky few who have the ability to peer into the vast array of the alternate universes that make up the multiverse we exist in. Every time this happens, to my understanding, the person is undertaking some kind of activity. My theory is that it involves specific locations at the exact right time, but also an increased blood flow in the brain. There's some part of the brain that is different with people like you. If you get enough blood flow to it, then you're able to perceive other alternate universes. Only for a small amount of time though. Again, I think it's location and time dependent. Case file number 528, written by Enilo Ra, CMV. If not for this glitch, I would surely have died. One day, I was driving to meet my sister for lunch in a city in Northern Virginia, about an hour from my house. It was raining outside and I had pretty much no tread on my tires, but I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, I had to take an exit onto a busy highway. If you've ever driven in Northern Virginia, you'll know the traffic is absolutely terrible because of all the commuting people from DC. As I was turning or merging into the highway, my car completely lost traction and I started spinning. I spun onto the highway, all the while just clutching my steering wheel and hoping for the best. As I had absolutely no control, I ended up stopping in the middle of the highway, facing the direction of oncoming traffic. Here's the weird part. When this happened, there was not a single car on either side of the road. Not a single car in sight. Without thinking, I drove my car straight, opposite direction of traffic, until I reached a patch of grass. I kid you not, the second my car was out of the way, cars were flying down the road again, hundreds of them. It was an extremely busy road once more. My sister even passed me, called me, and asked if that was me parked in the grass. I immediately started crying because I was suddenly overwhelmed with the severity of what had just happened. Had the traffic been what it normally was during my accident, I would have surely been hit head on, and most likely killed. I still cannot explain what happened to me to this day. It was like a glitch in the system. Obviously, it would have been an extremely lucky coincidence. However, I drive this road quite frequently and have never ever seen this highway with not a single car in sight. Lighter traffic, sure, but not 0 cars on both sides. And somehow there was nobody for the entire duration of my accident. If anyone has ever experienced anything similar, please let me know. Case file number 529, written by our own listener, Sally Mary. The secrets of reality. What even is real anymore? In the last 3 to 4 weeks, things have been, let's say, weird. I let these events pass through my mind at first, thinking, nah, just ignore it. It's my imagination. But I have had too many weird experiences now, and after the last hour, my mind has been blown. First of all, I was having a lie down after doing some chores and relaxing in the day, all settled and lying down. Me time, no one else in the house. So, how do I say this? The duvet on my husband's side is where his feet would be lifted up and down on their own. I just laid there thinking, what in the hell just happened? It actually froze me. I did not say anything as my family are not really into the paranormal, so I dismissed it. A mere 6 days later, I was in the bedroom again and I was gobsmacked. A voice in my left ear said, "Hey." Again, it's only me in the house, and I was shocked to my core. How was anyone supposed to process this? There was no one else there. The next occurrence was 3 days later, while I was lying down. Now, I can't explain this easily. Imagine a bolt across your temple straight through you. Instantly, a loud, internal static white boom noise, as if shooting through one part of your head left to right. I froze, and that was that. I never told anybody. I'm starting to think too many things are happening to me in my bedroom, and always when alone, apart from now with our dog. So again, laying down yesterday. Yes, I do work and have a busy life, which is why all these weird things tie together. Anyway, I'm lying down for a quick break before daily chores, cooking daily meals, etc. when our chihuahua was resting by my ankle on top of the duvet, weighing it down like she usually does. I was thinking about my courses as I got accepted for a new job. Just then, I heard our dog, who is sitting with me, barking inside the house in our usual spot downstairs under the net curtain, probably barking at the neighbor's cat. There is no mistaking her distinctive bark, and I think, what the hell? Instantly, my dog growls in disapproval and barks back, running right next to me like she's answering herself. No one is there though. There's no dog downstairs, she's right next to me. No simple explanation to be found. Then last night, it just got weirder. I'm sitting downstairs when my son comes down and decides to sleep on the sofa. I thought, okay, let's put some Netflix on. During the movie, I said, look, it's the man out of Saw. And a bit later on, we chatted. He said, oh mom, look, granddad gave me this book. Look, it's full of logos. I said, come on, not now, son. I'm still enjoying the film. Anyway, I went to bed a bit later and didn't end up finishing the movie as he was tired on the sofa. So today, for the love of God, I am cleaning in my son's room and say to him, at what point did you go upstairs as I left you sleeping on the couch last night? He mumbles. I am thinking, oh, he's still tired, resting up. It's fine. So later that night, we sat and had another chat. My other son brought home a book earlier and showed it to me. Well, it is the exact same heavy logo book as last night. I'm confused. Never seen it before, and now there are two. And when I asked my son about us watching the movie, about the actor from Saw and the book, he simply looks at me and says, Mom, last night I went upstairs and played chess in Mario. There was no movie. I also don't know what book you're on about. Yet the book was physically sitting on the coffee table this morning, and I even physically put back the sofa cushions to which he had removed them to set up his duvet on the sofa. I'm in disbelief and said no, and proved the movie was on as I had it saved. After some debating, he insisted he was not down here with me. Now, I don't know why all these strange things are happening so intensely to me, but I do know a lady who lived here passed away 20 years ago. Did my dog and son glitch for a brief time? I tried to be a rational mother, and this has all happened over the span of only 3 to 4 weeks. What do I make of this? Case file number 530, written by Stardinia. My cat has an incredible secret. I need to preface this by saying that my cat has diagnosed anxiety and has a very distinctive, needy meow. It's more like a guttural, whiny cry, but still very uniquely his meow. I've heard it enough at this point in my life to identify it 100% as his distress meow, and I can't mistake another noise for him. I'm sure other cat owners can relate. Anyway, due to my cat's anxiety, he meows and cries his special cry when he gets stuck in a room with the door shut. Similarly, he cries when a door is shut and he wants in. But more often than not, he cries because he likes to sneak in behind us when we go into a room he's not supposed to be in, and then he inevitably gets locked in when we don't realize and shut the door. Cue the crying a few minutes later. Yesterday, I went out into the garage for something, which is one of the forbidden rooms that my cat always wants to get in. 10 minutes later, I heard my cat crying from behind a door, clear as day, trapped somewhere. At first, I couldn't tell from where it was coming from, but once I realized it was coming from the garage, I figured he must have followed me out and got locked out again. I went to my bedroom to grab my phone before going out to get him, and there he was, sleeping on my bed. There's no way he would have been crying randomly like he was stuck from my open door bedroom, and even if he had, the bedroom door was open and I was less than a dozen feet from it, so it would have sounded totally different. It spooked me enough that I even checked my Ring camera to see if there were any animals outside our garage door, and didn't see anything. The spookiest part is that even my dogs heard something in the garage, as they both popped their heads up from where they were laying down, and stood up as if to go investigate. So I know it wasn't just me hearing things, there was a real meow, a very distinctive meow. Case file number 531, written by L. Grave 72. A borderline useless psychic ability, but cool, too. Me and my friends joke that I'm an incredibly useless psychic. I've always kind of had dreams, or perhaps false memories of dreams that came true, but I chalked it up to déjà vu. When I got my first phone, I realized that I would often get the urge to check it just before I got an important message or a text from someone I was waiting to hear from, which has continued to this day and caused my girlfriend to think I'm constantly on my phone since I just happen to look at it right as she messages me. I'm not allowed to talk during movies or shows with my friends because I'll just accidentally ruin the story by saying a specific plot element or twist when I'm trying to make a joke, and I've landed on some pretty out there details before. In some strange examples, I've brought up worries, thoughts, ideas, etc. I've had with friends and family, and they'd be dumbfounded as it would be something they had on their minds or were meaning to tell me. The night my ex-boyfriend cheated on me, I knew as soon as it happened, despite not really having a reason to, and he didn't confess to it for another few weeks when I eventually confronted him. For the most part, it's been completely useless, but a couple of times it's helped quite a bit. Like I've had dreams about traffic before. I've texted a friend I missed him on a night he was doing particularly bad, which saved him, and I've avoided getting yelled at by choosing a different response or action than I remembered taking before in the exact same situation at a point in a dream. I mainly say it's useless because I can't control it in any meaningful way, and usually it'll just be things that aren't particularly important or that I don't really need to change, so I just do what I did before, with the foresight that I'd be doing it again. Case file number 532, written by Me Hucklebear. When you find out, you're the NPC. This happened when I was a teenager, like pre-2000. I had just gotten home and no one was there, no cars or anything. I go to my room to listen to music. I didn't have a computer and smartphones weren't a thing. I start getting hungry, so I walk to the kitchen. I look out the hallway window and there's still no cars in the driveway. I walk through the living room and look directly at the couch. No one is there either. Finally, I get to the kitchen, make a sandwich, and get a cup of water. As I'm walking back through the living room, my stepdad says, "Aren't you gonna say hi?" I drop everything and scream like a 10-year-old girl at their first haunted house. I ask him when he got home, and he hits me with some glitch. He says he's been home since before I was, and he was wondering why I hadn't said hi when I got home. I said, "No way, your truck isn't outside, and you were not on the couch when I came in or when I went to the kitchen." Then he says, "Dude, you walked in, looked me dead in the eye, and didn't say anything. You then walked to your room and started listening to your music way too loudly. Then I see you strolling towards the kitchen, looked me dead in the eye again, and still didn't say anything. Now you come out of the kitchen, spill crap everywhere, and blame me like I'm a freaking ghost or something? Come on. I've been here the entire time, and my truck's been there too." Immediately, I opened the door to find his truck was there, and then cleaned up my mess while he grumbled about me being ungrateful, among a few other choice words. To this day, I have no idea what happened, but I swear on everything that's holy that he was not there when I got home, and his truck sure as heck wasn't there either. I know because the way I walked up to the porch would have meant that I walked through his truck. His truck was also loud, very loud, and had he got home while I was in the kitchen, I would have seen or at least heard him. Plus, even if he was trying to mess with me, how did he know exactly what I did when I came home? And why was he so pissed when he accomplished his goal of freaking me out? I think I may be an NPC. Case file number 533, written by Avina Fatua 00. Multiple light switches, moving on their own. Okay, so major weird event. I've been living in my current place for less than 2 years now. It's a rented room in a shared flat. I only shared it with another guy, a friend of mine, and used to share it until 2 weeks ago with his cat as well, who sadly passed away. The thing is, the light switch for my room was located outside my room, next to the door. I remember telling my friend about how annoying it was and how it was weird that there was not another inside the room. Like, okay, one outside is acceptable only if you put another inside too. But the bathroom and the kitchen worked the same way, just light switches outside those rooms, none to be found inside. It was very weird. So as uncomfortable as it felt, it wasn't the only room working like that in the flat. I specifically had to add a couple of lamps inside my room in case I wanted to have light without opening the door, just in case I wanted privacy, you know? So guess who's inside my freaking room looking at me like if I was an absolute imbecile? Yes, that's right, the light switch. And there was not an extra one, no. The one outside my room next to the door has completely vanished. It's as if it just moved itself inside. I'm here sitting dumbfounded, starting to doubt my sanity. What if I've been hallucinating for almost 2 years? But it cannot be because I remember talking explicitly about this with my friend more than once and establishing the whole 2 lamps business because of it. I have no words. Something feels terribly off, like it didn't frighten me or leave me extremely distraught, but just this unrelenting feeling of low blood pressure in the general feeling of everything around my house right now. I have been checking all the switches and have left and entered the place a couple times as well. Maybe somehow I've been mistaken all this time, but that in my opinion just sounds more crazy than a glitch in the Matrix. Bonus file, written by Micro Throwaway 64. Whatever this secret force was, terrified the life out of my dog. I had just turned 22 and my parents had sold their house and purchased a place out in the country. On a property, there was a big shed not far from the house that I decided to turn into. I felt kind of uncomfortable in the shed sometimes, but my dog kept me company, so it wasn't so bad. Anyway, I had been there maybe 2 weeks, and one night I'm on the computer. My dog was asleep at my feet, and I needed to pee, so I got up and went outside to handle my business. It's a beautiful, clear night, and the stars were incredible. Next thing I hear is a shed door slam behind me. I turn immediately and try to open it, but it won't budge. From inside the shed, I can hear my dog starting to growl, quietly at first, then louder. Now he's barking and I'm panicking trying to get the door open. I must mention that I'm 6'5" and well built, play sports, etc. But even ramming my full weight into the door won't open it, and I'm really panicking now as my dog's barks turned into whines, then whimpering, then silence. With all my might, I slam into the door one more time and it flies open. The light is off inside now and it's pitch black. It won't turn back on and I'm in complete darkness. I can't see my dog anywhere and I stumble around trying to find a torch. Finally, I find it and pick it up and turn on my torch, and I wasn't prepared for what I'd see next. My dog had literally squashed itself into the furthest, darkest corner of the room, eyes closed, and was shaking violently. I immediately moved towards him, and as soon as I got within reach of him, he leapt at me into my arms and wouldn't move. I picked him up, and I swear I've never ran so fast in my goddamn life. I never stepped foot in that shed ever again, and my dog wouldn't even go near that part of the property. I don't know what happened in that shed that night, but I'll never forget this. Case notes, bonus file. A clear-cut case of a malevolent presence if there ever was one. I've never heard of a dog being described as having so much fear before. What would cause that? Perhaps a demon revealing itself in its full essence of terror and pain, a la Hellraiser. Dogs and other animals have extremely strong senses, smell especially. It's said that demons emit sulfur compounds. I wonder if you smelled anything foul when you finally busted through the door. Even if you didn't, if there was even a hint of it, your dog would have detected it, amongst other things. I think dogs are especially good at sniffing out a person, or in this case, an entity's character and intentions. Back when I was a teenager, I had a golden retriever called Sunshine. I do miss him. I would take him on walks all the time around the block. He was always friendly with everyone. If he wasn't, and that was rare, I knew instantly that whoever that person was bad business. So in closing, I think you're very smart to trust your dog's instincts. Creepy file number 9, written by K.M. Darcy. When you find out you have an imaginary friend you don't even know about. When I was a teenager, there was one night I had been hanging out with some friends and didn't have a way home, but wasn't allowed to stay, so I ended up walking around the center of town. I was walking by this alley in between a church and some other building. It was kind of a grungy place to smoke and kill some time. The interesting part was the word paradox was spray painted on the brick foundation of the church. So I sat down and started talking to myself, just kind of thinking out loud to stay entertained and awake. It's important that I express that I was talking out loud to myself, not like an imaginary friend or anything like that. When I got up, I started walking again before I heard that single wowee and a police car pulled up next to me. I knew the cop because he was an assistant coach at my school. He asked me why I was out so late and I told him. Then he asked me where my friend went. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said he saw me talking to another kid in the alleyway before he pulled up. So I said, I was just talking to myself, and he goes, no, I saw another kid sitting across from you. I was watching the whole time. He was serious. It was like he thought I actually had a friend with me and they ran away when they saw a cop car. He ended up driving me back to my house. Looking back, I've thought maybe he was just messing with me, or that his eyes were mistaken by a shadow or something. But at the same time, it creeped me the hell out.